Welcome back to the Marketing Rules podcast, and I am joined today by Louise from UK Recruiter. Now, I'm sure most of you listening will know Louise because I think Louise, probably like me, we've been kicking around for a few years now within recruitment. But for those people who might not be aware of you and your work, could you give us a quick kind of intro of the many things that you do?
I would be happy to do that. The most flattering use of terminology there, kicking around. Been kicking around for, and I have. So I've been in this space for 30 years now. I started off working with a recruitment consultancy, and then 20 plus years ago, started doing all things UK Recruiter. I made a rather limiting choice when I called my business ukrecruiter.co.uk. So whilst I do deal globally with stuff, my main focus is in the UK, and it's with recruitment people. And initially I started off training recruiters how to use the internet, which was fabulous, and it was just the coolest thing ever. No one knew what they were doing. I was so excited to be there at the start of the kind of revolution for the recruitment space, and now I've got a community site for recruiters. Do my best to help facilitate conversations, introductions. I just like chatting with people in this sector.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know them, they're not worth knowing, right? That's usually the way I've described it, basically.
So, someone said that last week to me, actually. I was so flattered. I mean, do you know what's weird though is occasionally I do come across people who've been around for as long as I have, and our paths have never crossed, and that feels really crazy to me.
Then they probably weren't worth knowing, then, isn't it? That's the thing. Probably, but you've also got kind of a couple other kind of hats that you wear apart from UK Recruiter. So I know today we're going to talk about kind of like events, live events, online events, but that's another kind of area that you've kind of carved out over the last kind of couple of years, right?
Yeah. So back in 2013, I started with Alan Whitford, Mark Stevens, and Louis Welcome from Colleague Software. We started doing rec hangouts. Now, they weren't my idea, but I was kind of like the producer. So I wasn't really on screen, but I was kind of making certain that the guests were ready, and I was doing all the kind of chat with the audience and stuff in typing chat. And I loved doing that. And then from there, we moved from Google to Blab, which no longer exists, and from there to Crowdcast. So I was using Crowdcast 2017, and I absolutely loved everything about it. This idea that you could bring people together to talk to an audience in real time and be online. And I'm actually a very lazy extrovert, so not leaving my desk is perfect. So bringing people kind of together and using technology to do that was just the most cool thing. Since then, I must have run 1,000 online events. I actually now work for Crowdcast. So as well as having a full-time UK Recruiter job, I also do customer success for them. And then about a year ago, Stephen O'Donnell and I started realising that we were helping people with their events more and more. And so now we've got a business called Going Live Events. So a few things going on.
You could, to say the least. Crowdcast has been one of the kind of winners, right, over the last kind of year, because I hadn't even heard of Crowdcast until kind of probably about this time last year. And obviously me and you we do a little bit around that, the working lunch event. And that was my kind of first introduction to it. And then it just is everywhere. Every other person I talk to now is using Crowdcast to run their events. Now, I don't know if that's you and your influence on just generally on the market, or it's part of that, and that and the work that they've been doing, and that it's one of the better systems out there for running kind of online events. It just it seems to be everywhere at the minute.
Yeah, I think one of the things which people like about Crowdcast is that, I mean, Zoom's great. We're using Zoom now. I love Zoom. But if you want to have that audience interaction, you just don't get it. So I was involved in a tech event for somebody, and they were using Zoom for the second time. And I said to them after the first one, it's just rubbish. I can't see who's in the audience. They can't chat with each other easily. We can't, there's ask a question functionality on Crowdcast. There's some really cool engagement features which they get right. I think that one of the things we're going to talk about is why recruiters run online events. But more and more, they're looking for platforms which have that engagement functionality and Zoom just does not.
Yeah.
So Crowdcast is a natural choice.
Yeah. I mean, we also need to mention that you also did offline events. That's where kind of, that's what pre-COVID, this would have been a chat about running offline events and actually face-to-face events. So how long have you been doing that, and where did that kind of come from?
Yeah, so 19 years ago, something like that, I started doing networking events in London. So I'm not based in London, and I would travel in. We'd do them once every 2 months. We ended up doing them in venues like Tiger in Piccadilly. So we'd have an entire floor of Tiger, bringing together 200 recruiters. I'd get some sponsors to pay for drinks. I mean, goodness only knows what the sponsors got out of it, because there was so many people there, it was difficult to chat with them. And I ran them with Broadbean. So Dan Maguire was really happy to put some money up for those. And I really, really liked that, but I felt it ran its course. We had a couple of tricky instances with a ton of drunk recruiters. I mean, these were the days when, lots of people were drinking a lot, doing coke, stuff like that. Wasn't cool with me. I had two babies while this was happening. So not actually at the event, but I was coming into London hugely pregnant, spending an evening with a ton of really drunk recruiters. And I was starting to think, maybe this isn't quite me. So then I started working with RBS, and we did the directors' events. So they were in-person events once a quarter at RBS. And they were brilliant, 60 recruiters in a room talking about the challenges of their business. And I loved doing that. And it felt it had more purpose. So I don't think anyone could accuse me of not networking. It's what I love doing. But this kind of information sharing felt more valuable to me.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, I think, where I've gone with the online events as well, has been, it's more than just a chat.
Yeah. That makes sense. So with regards to kind of online events is what we're going to kind of chat about today. What are the kind of pros and cons of kind of going down that route? So for instance, if we've got lots of recruiters who listen and they're thinking, one, I suppose, have they missed the boat? And two, why should they kind of go around? Why should they kind of consider an online event? I know you mentioned already about kind of sharing and adding value. So I guess that might be kind of one of the kind of bigger points, but what are the pros and cons now of kind of going around of setting up an event?
Okay, so there's a few questions there. One is, have you missed the boat? And I think, broadly speaking, not, but it depends on what you want to do. So you mentioned to me about our working lunch events.
Yeah.
So we were doing those at the start of lockdown. It was Claire Bush's idea. She said to me, let's do these. I was like, okay. And it was a great idea. And then we brought other hosts in, but we were doing them daily. That was a lot of content to be producing. And I think that right at that point in time, lots of other people were doing online events as well. And we made the right decision to make those weekly. So I think if somebody else came into this space now and was saying, I'm going to do something like the working lunch, I'm going to do it every single day, it's going to be a general chat for people in the recruitment space, I think they might struggle. Recruiting Gym do some amazing daily stand-ups, and then they do Ask the Coach and things like that. And there's other people who have their own communities, and they broadcast regularly to those. But something general, big, I think people would probably struggle with it. But something niche, targeted, purposeful, I definitely don't think it's too late.
Yeah.
I think you've just got to think about, there's a few things, and you'll totally know this running a podcast, is what's your overall objective? Who's your audience? What's going to entice them? What's the mechanism I should use to get it out to them? And if you don't think about those things, then you're screwed from the outset.
Yeah. Planning is definitely the kind of one of the things you need to do before you I wouldn't suggest anyone just jump in and try these things. And you've basically now you've kind of got a plethora of different kind of ways of running these events. So we've already mentioned kind of Crowdcast, which I'm a fan of too, and that allows you to run as close an offline event online. But obviously you've got Zoom, as I said, we're doing it today, and you've got other streaming channels like kind of LinkedIn Live and Facebook Live, etc., etc. I mean, do you think those kind of play a part in that, or do you think you should specialize in one rather than the other, or does one give you a better kind of traction, i.e. is it Crowdcast because it gives you a better offline kind of simulation, as it were, or should you just kind of like just blast it out to as many places as possible?
I guess it depends on what your overall objective is. So if you're looking to build a community, then you need somewhere you can keep, you can pull people to you and keep their information. So, and again, I know you did a great session for me on our marketing event, and this is one of the things you're talking about is, it depends on what you're going to do those people. If you use LinkedIn Live, you can reach a wider audience. But you don't have any of their details. So you only know who they are when they then come to you. So they either leave a comment or they get in touch or they follow your call to action. So that's really challenging if you're looking to build a community. But if you're looking to get a message out, it can be really effective. Same with Facebook Live. I accidentally popped into somebody's room on Facebook Live the other day, and it made me think, why am I not doing some stuff on there? I run these tech events. I could get maybe 3 of the companies involved in that who use Facebook to come together with me to talk about a specific topic. And then we could just see who turns up. It's a little bit like popping a sign in the window of a pub saying 12 o'clock today, we're talking about blah, blah, blah. But again, with Facebook, it's how do you get those people into your community? You have to give them the call to action to sign up to your newsletter or to come back next week. One of the ones you didn't mention, which is interesting, is Clubhouse. So if we were talking about this 6 months ago, if we were doing this 6 months ago, we would be having a conversation about the relevance of Clubhouse in the recruitment space, and we're not.
Don't get me going on Clubhouse. It's a big old waste of time, if you ask me. But and is there any kind of subtleties that you've observed around running recruitment events as opposed to running kind of other kind of types? Because you run recruitment focused events, tech focused events, everything kind of, and is it, for the recruiters listening, is there anything that they should kind of pay more attention to when they're trying to kind of put these events out there that's specific to them?
I spoke to somebody yesterday who's looking to run events for job seekers. So as a recruiter, you're thinking about, am I going to be trying to attract clients? Am I going to be trying to attract job seekers? Am I looking just to showcase my expertise? Or what you could be doing is specifically something like a job fair, which is not just attracting a talent pool, it's looking for people to fill a specific job. I said you might be looking to attract clients, but you could actually be looking to attract specific clients, and you can run events that do that. So there's 5 different things that you could be doing here, 5 different purposes. There's probably more. But if I give you an example, if I'm a recruiter and I've got a niche in pharmaceuticals, I might decide to run some events for the hiring managers in those type of businesses. Well, I've got to really, really think about what's going to want to get them engaged, what is going to make them come to my event, what other channels are they following, what other ways are they listening to content, because maybe LinkedIn isn't for them, maybe Facebook isn't, maybe a Crowdcast is, I don't know. But you have to really know quite a lot of information before you can start to target those people. But if I really, really wanted to work with a certain 5 pharmaceutical companies, my approach would be totally different, because I would be approaching those 5 decision makers to speak on my live broadcast, podcast, whatever it is. So I think there's a kind of like, it's what am I hoping to achieve, and what's the best mechanism to do that? Because actually, maybe you can be slightly more direct. Maybe you don't have to just hope that they see you floating past on LinkedIn. Maybe you can directly get in touch with these people and say, I want you to be part of it.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things there, isn't it? One, most people kind of like being invited. It's quite flattering to be invited onto these things, and that's always a good thing. And I do a few kind of presentations around account-based marketing, and being hyper-targeted in account-based marketing is what you need to do. And this is actually a very good kind of piece of content for account-based marketing, to invite on very specific clients and to kind of ask them to talk and share their knowledge, etc., etc. And it's quite selfish, because you don't actually care if there's an audience or not. What you're doing is more flattering that client than anything else. So you're using, that's your specific kind of reason to use it. So on the back of that, then, are there now too many of these kinds of events kind of running out there? And does it really matter? Because if we kind of take your example, you being hyper targeted, it doesn't care if there's 1,000 other events that are doing something very similar. But are you likely to kind of get lost in the noise, or, and just follow up, I know this is 3 questions in one. has that noise decreased because now we are kind of coming out of kind of lockdown and people are starting to kind of do more face-to-face stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few points in there, which is that if you are just doing this to get the right people to engage with you, then probably it's not a massive concern. But what I would say is ego very often then comes into play, where you might be doing, starting this series thinking it doesn't matter about the numbers, all I'm looking for is quality, or it doesn't matter about the numbers, I just want to engage with these particular people. And then competitively you start thinking, well, hold on, I ought to be getting more viewers in this. My time is worth more than this. We're producing amazing content. And then you probably start to slightly change direction, take your eye off what the original plan was and think, I want to be on Spotify as well. I want to be on iTunes. I want people to listen to my content. And I've seen that happen to people who had a very clear objective and then they're thinking, well, actually, I do want a large audience. And I think that if that happens, then yeah, there's a lot of noise out there. You've got to find a way to cut through it. We can't all interview the most amazing people. We've got to think about, it's like what you do, is that you interview people who are spot on for your audience. You're not looking to interview, or maybe you are, but you're not looking to interview the marketing director of Amazon always. You're looking to interview people who've got relevance to your space. You said something else I want to just pick up on, which is people are going back to work. There is absolutely no two ways about it. We are not all sat at home. I mean, you and I are, but everybody else is not sat at home. And they can't sit at their desks at 11 o'clock in the morning watching you broadcast. Yeah. So I think we have to be aware of that. I don't know whether I have a specific answer to that, but having content available afterwards, which is the traditional webinar type style anyway, or on demand, is really important.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you pick up on the working lunch example that we've kind of both worked on, the reasons why we kind of went down to one a week is because we knew we were kind of coming out of lockdown, and not that we had seen any real adverse effect in the analytics, because there's still lots of people kind of registered, but it was just a feeling you got that people wouldn't be watching this as much, basically, because they were going back to the office. And, you know, someone made the observation, you probably wouldn't want your boss looking over your shoulder while you were sat at your desk, kind of, you know, watching. So having that kind of recorded kind of version, which is a really good tip for anybody who's thinking about it. You know, make sure there's a recording of whatever you're doing, because, you know, there's a lot of value in then being able to people to watch that at a later date. Since things now have kind of moved online, let's assume that they're staying online for the minute. Have you noticed that generally attendances went up? I know obviously we just talked that they've gone down, but during that kind of main period, did they kind of go up? Was it were they more engaged? Did they hang around for longer? I mean, what's the difference almost between that and being offline? Because there's differences, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the attendance numbers definitely went up. Whether they were any more engaged is tricky. There was a lot of people who were probably just wanted to keep busy. So whether they were keeping busy with the right stuff, goodness only knows. Were they actually, you know, following through with the call to action? Were they buying from people? I don't know, because I don't run those type of events. But my tech event last year, so I wasn't going to do it online, and I was thinking, well, I must do it online. And I did it in June. Really good attendance numbers, so far higher than I would have had in person. And then I wasn't going to run it again. And then I was persuaded into doing it in November. And now, of course, I'm doing it this June. But what I would say is I can't wait till we can run that in person, because what is really cool about those type of events is the conversations that happen over coffee. And there's no way I've seen to replicate that in an online event. And we can talk about that a bit if you want. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think some people will have found a whole new audience to their content who have stuck with them because it's brilliant. I think if you're producing average content, you probably did see numbers go up, and then people are like, well, actually, I'm not going to stay committed to this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with the whole point. One of the reasons, the difficulty I find with a lot of online events is that networking piece that just I haven't seen and haven't found any way of replicating online. And I've used, I think over the past year, I think every kind of conferencing type, you know, tool that there's available. One where I can't remember what it was named was. There's one where it looks like you're in a conference and you can move from table to table and things like that. Even then, it always feels forced and awkward. and you suddenly people come up on screen who you've never met before, you don't know, and it's like, and you feel really, and I'm pretty confident when it comes to these things, and I feel awkward. It's like I don't really know what to say here. That's the bit I think I miss. So that kind of brings me on to my kind of next question: is there a way of blending kind of online and offline? Can you see some way that that can be achieved, that you can kind of keep the numbers up with people who aren't able to attend an actual live event, but still make sure that they can kind of tune in and interact as well as they can?
I'm tempted to give a very flippant no response to this, but I'm sure you can. I just haven't seen it. So last week I went to an event online, Eventbrite. So Eventbrite are a massive event ticketing platform for anyone who doesn't know them. They ran an event online, and I'll be careful what I say here, but it wasn't actually brilliant. So if they can't get it right, I mean, don't have hope for anybody else. I do know that some people have done a relatively good job of this. So, and I'll give you a couple of examples in a minute. But one of the problems Eventbrite had was that, you're kind of just sitting there watching somebody on screen, and the chat, I mean, they must have had thousands and thousands of people there. And so all you see is one person talking and a sea of noise scrolling down here, and you couldn't respond to anybody individually. And I know you can't do that on Crowdcast either, but this was an enormous event, so you just see all this stuff happening, and then they had 3 kind of breakout rooms, but all they were people bombarding you with follow me on LinkedIn or find me on Twitter, whatever it is, blah blah blah. I can't hear any audio, the picture's all fuzzy for me. So you imagine being at an actual event where that's all you've got is people shoving their business cards in your faces and saying the speaker sounds muffled to me. So that experience was not good, and I would imagine they have the resources to get that right. 2 events I've seen which are quite good is Jamie Leonard has done some of the things with his Reconverse. I know that he's managed to mix an element of networking with presentations. I think he has all of his content pre-recorded, which I don't like. I prefer to have live content, even though the chances of it ballsing up are quite high. I much prefer things live. And the other thing is the Forum of In-House Recruitment Managers, they did some awards where they had what you're talking about, where you can go to a kind of round table and you can go and sit down. And I've heard that was actually quite good fun. But the person who told me that knew everybody who was there. So they probably had no issue with, like you say, going in, sitting down at a table and just starting to talk.
Yeah. No, I've got an example. So again, another big, larger company, and usually a company who I'm a massive advocate of, which is HubSpot. I kind of attended their yearly conference, and it was very similar to the Eventbrite version. This was all online, but the fact that so many people had joined and so many the chat was absolutely crowded with kind of like follow me on LinkedIn, here's this, here's that, and it just was just noise, and the message got lost. And actually, when they kind of cut to different speakers, it wasn't particularly well kind of organized. There was still people don't whether know to have the blurry background or what to do with their background. There wasn't any kind of consistency, and you'd imagine that a business of that size would have kind of been able to get that right. So yeah, I mean, I kind of hope there is some way of blending the two, because for me, not being able to kind of getting in out of London all the time, or being able to attend regional events and things like that, which can be quite difficult. I still want to have access to that, because those are the things that have been quite useful for us as a business, being able to attend businesses for the north of England, which we would have never gone anywhere near. But now they're online. Yeah, we've got a kind of a captive audience. But being able to do that face to face would be nigh on impossible to kind of do those. So I hope somehow someone figures out how to do it. But like you, I can't really think of how that would work right now, unless it was, the only thing I can think of is maybe it was done across kind of several screens. You could second screen it, and you could do something on your mobile. That's where the chat happened, and then you actually viewed online, and maybe kind of have 2 things going at once. Maybe that's the way to do it, but I don't know.
Yeah, but and I seen that somebody who I was speaking to about running an event, they were having an in-person event and they wanted to have the content broadcast out to Crowdcast, but their issue was those people in the audience at the in-person event are missing out on the chat that's happening online. And they were like, well, could we have it on our phones? And I'm like, well, but then you're going to have a video coming through on your phone and it's going to completely suck all the Wi-Fi out of the venue. And what are people going to do? They're going to be looking down at their phone to see Sally, who's on stage, who's also on my phone. So that's not
Oh,
obvious
I suppose
either.
I was thinking maybe just a chat is done on your
Yeah.
phone. I think
Yeah.
that might be a way of going to go about it. Whether that's some kind of, whether you can integrate some kind of chat function, but you can filter it out. That maybe that, I don't know, but yeah. Now, one thing I wanted to pick up on, which I know it's a hot topic for you, is diversity within events. We try and on this podcast always kind of try and keep this as a diverse kind of show as possible. Not always that easy. How easy is that when you're running events to kind of make it as diverse as possible? Is this something, obviously there's something that has kind of changed, I've seen definitely over the last year, and I've seen you pick people up on it as well online. But it can't always be as easy, because obviously you can get a diverse speakers, but how then do you kind of make sure that sponsors and audiences and everything else kind of has the same kind of ethos and is as diverse as you want it to be as well?
So sponsors is the big problem, actually. So if you're running an event and you've got sponsors who are speaking, my tech event's exactly this problem. People who speak at my event represent their organisations. It's the directors of those organisations, and they're not all Black women. Yeah. So not that is the only diversity I'm going for, just to be absolutely clear. But what I'm saying is that when you've got sponsors who are speaking, it's a real challenge. But when you don't have sponsors who are speaking, it can be equally difficult. But I don't want to hear anybody say it's impossible, because it is not impossible. There are workarounds for this. I was talking to somebody who you both know really well, who was doing a lot of founder focus series on Crowdcast, and he has had 6 men speak so far. And I pulled him up on it privately because I really like the guy. And he said, oh yeah, it's tricky. So I said, I can give you some solutions. If you're going to do founder focuses, and he's like, well, they're all men and they're all white. So if you're going to do founder focuses, why don't you do founders who come on screen with you, but also bring their up and coming staff from their organization, get them to bring somebody else with them who's within their organization, who represents a type of talent and the future of their business. I mean, that is not complicated, is it?
No, I mean, I agree. I think also, I know from the podcast kind of point of view, if there's people I want to talk to, and I know I want to have a kind of trying to kind of have an equal mix when it comes to kind of gender and diversity within the business, on the episodes, I go find someone of interest. I would type in possibly into LinkedIn who I want to talk to, and then just go find certain people. I've also, APSCO run Women in Recruitment, which is, again, is a great kind of resource for us when we wanted to kind of find people who I want to talk to, people who are women in tech and things like that. And again, there are resources out there you can kind of go down, you can use, and if you want to kind of, if you're determined enough, it actually isn't that difficult. I suppose the other thing is, I did also mention audiences, and how do you kind of measure? Do you measure the diversity of your audiences when you run events? And if you do, how? If not, do you care? Or what's your kind of feeling there?
Well, that's my next mission, is to look at the diversity of my audience. It's something I've started looking at already. I should, I will. And I don't have an obvious answer for it, but I'm going to go out and seek it. In actual fact, it's something I'm thinking about doing for one of the working lunches, is talking about that. Yeah. Is that the next step for those of us who are looking to see better equity on stage in the audience? Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting question you raise.
Yeah, I mean, I bring it up. It's actually for the podcast, it's actually quite easy. The statistics we get, because most of this is handled through Anchor, which is on Spotify. We get back kind of stats on the gender split, and we know it's about, I think, 54% male to female, so almost even, basically. But you might not be able to get those kinds of statistics from other, on a Zoom call. You're not going to get that on a Zoom call, right? You're just never going to kind of get that kind of thing. I think we're lucky with but yeah, it would be interesting to kind of, again, I suppose you have to assume that people are going to give you that information in the first place as well, to be able to kind of measure it, which brings up all kinds of other kind of issues, I suppose, at that point. With regards to events in general and the events and some of the events you run, what does success look like? Which is always a difficult question, I know, but you've talked about having kind of clear goals and and why you're doing it, so you must have also understand what's been successful and when it hasn't been successful.
So I don't know whether I measure the success the same way as other people, but and it's the same, I think, for in-person events as online. So if I give you an example, I would normally organise a speaker selection for the JobGate conference. It's a job board event. So success for me on that one is that the speakers on stage had a fabulous time. So they got the audience they expected, they got the support they expected, everything worked as they were hoping, and they enjoyed the event and they were pleased they did it. Second bit of success is that the audience got what they came for. So we didn't dick them about by making them wait, we didn't change someone at the last minute. Everything that they were hoping to achieve from it, they got. I like to use the word delighted. They were delighted when they went away. And the third thing for me is that I got booked next year to do it again. So that means the organiser was really happy with what was achieved. There's a fourth bit to this, which is that anybody looking from the outside would think that's the sort of event I'd like to run.
Yeah, well, that all makes sense, right? I mean, that's easy, actually.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, sorted. Okay, so final question for you, Louise, is the future of kind of recruitment events. You know, what is the future? Do they have a future? What do they look like? And what part do you think you're going to be playing within that?
Well, I hope I am playing a part in them, and I hope my part will be to be back to running in-person events. So I am involved. I'm involved in the Agency Expo in October in Birmingham. I'm hoping to be able to go along to Global Recruiters event in September. Stephen O'Donnell's got his NORAs in November. I've got a venue booked for the 10th of November, which I might run an event at. And you and I are also running the Recruitment Marketing Congress again in November. I don't know if you've even got the date in your diary yet.
I haven't.
No, but we're definitely doing it. So I think that there'll be. So webinars existed 5 years ago. Online events existed 5 years ago. They're going to continue to exist once we go back to work and once we can do things in person. There's a statistic which was shared on the Eventbrite event, which was 73% of people cannot wait to be able to go back to an in-person event. And I totally believe that. And I think that event organisers will benefit from that. So as long as you can make people feel secure and safe, you might have trouble with people travelling in the short term. But once you can do those in-person events, probably next year, I think they're going to rebound really strongly. I hope that people will have high expectations of an event and they won't be travelling willy-nilly to meet up with people, to go to a conference which might not be relevant. I hope that people will be asking, what's in it for me? Are these the speakers I need to hear from? Is this content relevant? Because that does make us up our game. So I really hope that that is part of it, is that we're going to go to the best, the most useful events. And the same for the online events, is that, you know, the people will run a vast range of events in the recruitment space. Some of them might only have 5 people taking part, but if they're the right 5 people, then keep on going. And if it's 500 people and they're perfect and they're engaged, then that's even better. But I do believe there's a strong place for in-person and online events. I just think it will take maybe another year for that to kind of settle down, and then hopefully we'll be in a more level space. But yeah, no, I'm really hoping I'm going to be part of that.
Well, that's just a good reason to have you back next year, isn't it? Basically, to see where we are at that point. Louise, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James.